This is the Planet Shapers podcast.
I'm Peter Dredge, the co-founder of Planet Shapers. In this series, I speak with people making a positive impact around sustainability. Honest discussions with those helping to shape a more sustainable future. Today, I'm joined by Sam Canavan, Chief Operating Officer at Stacked Farm. Stacked Farm is developing automated indoor vertical farming systems designed to grow fresh produce year-round while dramatically reducing land use, water consumption, and chemical inputs. Sam is helping scale a model of food production that aims to make farming more resilient and environmentally sustainable as climate and population pressures grow. Welcome, Sam.
Thanks, Peter. Great to be here.
Tell me, vertical farming, this is fascinating for me. What is Stacked Farm and how does your vertical farming systems work?
We are building the world's biggest indoor, completely automated, controlled environment agricultural experiences. And so the way to think about it is it can be a somewhat arcane concept, definitely vertical farming. And a lot of people say, but what are you actually growing in there? I mean, the reality is we grow soft herbs and leafy greens. So all of the key items that you might expect to find on your supermarket shelf. So your rocket, your spinach, your basils, your coriander, your dills, your mint, etc., etc. And the system is completely indoors, huge footprint, right? So we're building the biggest indoor automated vertical farm in the world at Melbourne Airport at the moment, due to open towards the end of 2026. More than 10,000 square meter footprint, almost 11,000 square meters, 16 meters high as well, which is quite hard to wrap your head around the sheer scale of that. And what it actually is all completely indoors and enclosed, completely disparate to what you might expect from outdoor growing. And you have a scenario where we grow with different levels of lights in racks, and we don't grow with soil. We obviously don't grow with sunlight. Literally all that those plants get is the best possible strains of light that they need via our proprietary lighting, and they get nutrients that are fed to them hydroponically through the water system where we constantly irrigate the plants. And then you have a scenario where they're in their perfect environment at all times. I mean, the sun only sets for 6 hours a night as well, so 18 hours of perfect sunlight a day, compared to, of course, you're going to get the various vagaries of cloud and lack of sunshine in the outdoor environment, which means you essentially get produce that grows twice as quickly as typical outdoor grown produce, many times higher nutrient value as well, because you're not degrading nutrients value because you are keeping that produce in a perfectly controlled environment. We optimize for the right humidity that the plant needs at any given time of its life cycle, the right temperature, the right ozone in the air, all of these different things. And then what ends up happening is the entire process is completely automated end to end. Again, hard to wrap your head around. So no human hands anywhere near this farm, a small skerrick of the amount of people you would need to produce comparable output in an outdoor farm, something like 10% of the humans that you would need compared to outdoor farming. And what actually happens then is the whole process is done end to end in this closed loop system via a whole set of 20 plus proprietary pieces of automation and our lighting and our lift systems and our seeding machine, and our harvesting machine, all done autonomously, all done using a large swath of machine learning and AI as well, and vision systems and millions of data points to constantly refine the output of the crops. And then you have a scenario where, say, a crop is ready to be harvested at, let's call it 30 days. Your cos leaf or your spinach is ready to be harvested. It then uses the machine learning to know, okay, perfect, yield is going to be right, flavor profile is going to be right, this thing is ready to go. The lift systems then take all of these trays. So we build all of the different crops on trays that are about 3.8 meters wide. They're 30 centimeters long and 30 centimeters wide. The lift system takes all those trays, tray by tray by tray, off the back of the stack. They run through a completely automated harvest line, through a high speed and very sharp bandsaw system. It takes about 30 seconds then, end to end, for the produce to go from the rack, where it's ready to be harvested, all the way through. It's mixed, it's sorted, there's an optical grader, so the best possible produce only makes its way through. Anything that's a little bit has a little bit of tip burn, a little bit of yellowing, a little bit of splitting is actually kicked out. So you're only getting A-grade produce, and then it's in a modified atmosphere bag, flushed with nitrogen and oxygen in about 30 seconds flat and into a 4-degree cold store, right, within minutes. And then what happens, of course, is you're going to have a gap where you've harvested. Then you have produce that might be, say, halfway through its growing cycle that comes in an automated way via this leaf system to replace the harvested produce and then spend the last, say, 10 days of its life under those conditions in the final room. And then, of course, you have a gap before then, and that's when new seeding starts as well. So as something is harvested, something is then moved to replace what was harvested, and brand new produce is seeded. All of this is automated. All of this is running essentially on remote control, where we can have this consolidated headquarters of the farm, which is on the Gold Coast at the moment, through all of our proprietary software systems and our operating platform to run the farm. And so what it ultimately means, and sort of the problems we then solve, it means that you're inoculated from the vagaries of the outdoors. Of course, we know about this. There's seasonality issues in fresh produce. There's issues with pathogens. There's issues with pests. There's issues with climate and the way it is changing. There's issues with food miles. There's issues with weather. And all of that, you then have this controlled environment where, pathogens alone, that is a very risky proposition. Leafy greens are risky, right? It's second to probably only proteins, where you have a higher chance of Listeria, E. coli, Salmonella, or foreign bodies making their way into your leafy green. None of that is an issue at Stacked Farm. And because we're growing up versus out, using a fraction of the land space or the floor, the footprint that you would need to produce the equivalent amount outdoors, we can actually sign leases to put Stacked Farms much closer to distribution centres and to hubs to minimise the food miles. So Melbourne Airport is a great example. I mean, we are 1.5 kilometres from the terminals at Melbourne Airport. So we're right there at Tullamarine, and you're then within several kilometres only of the biggest distribution centres for the biggest retailers and supermarkets. So there's a world where your perfect produce is harvested at 6 a.m. and it is then in a consumer's hand, having gone through the distribution centre process by the end of that day, having never had the cold chain broken the whole way through, and maybe having travelled a grand total of 5 to 10 kilometres in absolute terms. So it's an exciting proposition. It's certainly a lot to bite off as a business, given this is unprecedented globally to be doing something like this. But we're an 11-year-old business. We've made a significant amount of progress scaling up into bigger and bigger facilities. And now, just 2026, we're ready to launch the first, blueprint for what will be these mega farms that we plan to roll out all across the world.
Can you just summarize for me again what the environmental advantages are, just for those that, just grappling to get their head around this? What are the environmental advantages about this indoor vertical farming model?
So your key advantages from a sustainability point of view, and there are many. Obviously, the food miles makes a lot of sense. You're not dealing with potentially outdoor growers who might be hundreds and hundreds of kilometers away from distribution center. We can be as close to them as possible. That's a big tick. Water is another huge piece of upside in the vertical farming systems that we built. So water, I think a lot of people would know, is maybe one of the single biggest slights or drawbacks for outdoor farming. I mean, it's something like 70% of the world's fresh water is used for agriculture. It's extremely inefficient as a process, especially when you have times of drought. And so Stacked Farm, we use 99% less water for the same output compared to what you would do outdoors. And that's because we built these customized systems where you've got reverse osmosis machines, where you've essentially got the ability to use, say, rainwater, get it into your farm, treat it before it goes in, of course, to make sure it's the highest possible quality, and then recirculate the water back through the farm for the irrigation. Because the thing to remember is, unlike, say, outdoor growing, where they have no choice as well but to triple chlorinated wash the plants again and again and again because they're worried, understandably, about pathogens or foreign bodies, we don't have to do any of that. We don't touch the plant with water outside of the roots that are getting irrigated hydroponically. So the harvesting process is water-free as well. So the only water that ever leaves the facility might be the tiniest skerrick that you end up with on the produce. It's remnants from the hydroponic nutrient dosing process. And then you've also got the energy efficiency that we built through essentially a customized set of LED lights, which we make in-house and we've refined over the last 11 years, which are about 47% more energy efficient than any LED light that you would imagine on the market. We've also got green energy, of course, is the way that we power the business, definitely. And then you've got sort of other upsides here, like the, diminishing of food waste, of course, and that works on several levels. Diminishing of food waste because you're going to get less rejection because the produce is fresher, because the produce has traveled less far to make it into a consumer's hands. So you're going to have produce that's landing on a shelf maybe with 15, 16 days shelf life and a markedly higher chance then of being sold, especially given the produce holds up so well. Definitely. That's a really big factor here. And so it's sort of all of these things combined. You think about the footprint, less footprint you're taking up, access to distribution centers and less food miles, the lighting system, the green energy, the water and lack of water usage, less wastage in the plants. It all combines to create a really nice sustainability picture. And not to mention, you're actually getting plants growing inside that are sequestering carbon as well at the same time. So yeah, it ticks many, many boxes from a sustainability front. And then maybe the one other piece is this sort of idea of the substrate that we use, the growing medium. It's not soil, it's something else that is completely biodegradable, completely sustainable. And then that means that even your waste remnants from the harvest end up being able to be used for green waste or for fertilizer even. And so you get this lovely little almost circular economy attached to it.
Tell me about your growth and expansion plans. On the one hand, in terms of crops and what you hope to be able to grow, and in terms of just sites and geographical expansion.
What we focus in on are the leafy greens and soft herbs, where there is most demand, where you have the most issues as well. You have seasonality in many of these soft herbs where the price might vary by 3x. Say basil in the middle of down season might be $30 a kilo wholesale compared to $10 in the middle of a high season. And so there are huge variances in some of the pricing of these herbs, and that's something else we focus on. But broadly, I don't think a consumer would be surprised to learn the SKUs or the product lines that we're going to launch with in Melbourne and that we're going to sort of double click on, right? So anything that you would imagine as a consumer that you feel like, oh, I buy that regularly, those would be the highest volume lines. Baby spinach, by far the biggest selling leafy green on Australian shelves and even globally. Rocket, of course, you have iceberg, you have cos, you have mesclun and 4-leaf mixes, you have butter leaves. And then on the herb front, again, as you would imagine, it's your basils, it's your corianders, it's your mints, it's your parsleys, it's your thymes to some extent. We're not going to grow, say, rosemary, which grows like a weed and is essentially, a tree and has a really firm stem. That's not something that would be viable for us. And we're not going to grow avocados or bananas or anything like that. But outside of what we can grow in fresh herbs and leafy greens, in our Gold Coast headquarters, we've got 12 research and development rooms, which are sort of microcosms or mini versions of our main farms. And we have a whole science team and a whole horticulture team, and they are constantly refining and thinking about, are there many ways that we can make our existing suite of products better, constantly improving the way we treat the seeds, the growing conditions, the variable lighting that we use, all of these different things. And then could we actually expand into different produce and at least have that in our back pocket for when opportunities arise? So that's the other thing. We want flexibility above all else. We don't want to be tied to 1 or 2 or 3 different produce lines. We're launching with 12 in Melbourne, which is a very healthy set of SKUs, but we have the ability to grow great strawberries. And we've done that in the past. I mean, we've got this variety of Japanese strawberry, which would never grow outdoors in Australia because it needs very specific conditions in the foothills of the northern Japanese mountains. We've grown that fantastically because we can emulate those conditions. We've grown in those R&D labs exceptional chilies, tomatoes, capsicums. I mean, all of these things are on the cards, but in the near term, we focus on the core leafy greens and soft herbs, and then we've got very exciting additional projects in our back pocket. And then as for expansion, you've got the Gold Coast facility, which we actually started out as a business 11 years ago with a tiny, by comparison, footprint, 200 square meters, a little industrial shack in the back streets of Burleigh Heads on the Gold Coast, where we figured out all the original iterations of the automation and can we actually grow this thing? Could we make this work? Then we upgraded by another 200 square meters to 400 square meters. Then we got to the facility at the moment several years ago in Arundel, where the farm is 2,200 square meters and we've got head office and manufacturing facility or commissioning facility attached to it. And then you jump to Melbourne, which is 11,000 square meters. So 5 times as big, 6 times as big. And that is the model going forward for us, is that Melbourne scale and essentially being able to copy and paste that anywhere in the world. So it doesn't matter if it's Melbourne or Manila or Menifee, it doesn't matter because it's essentially our system, our process, our growing, our designs, our IP, our construction methodology. We just need the right land space, the right energy, the right zoning to that, and obviously the right demand and the right lease. And we can implant this anywhere in the world. So Melbourne opening towards the end of 2026 as the first mega farm. We've got Las Vegas as a slightly smaller farm that's opening by the middle of the year. And then we've also got several other projects in the pipeline in Australia and across California as well. So in the short term, a dual-pronged approach between East Coast Australia and West Coast US, with expansion plans across both the US and Australia.
Just generally, when you're pitching to people about vertical farming, what do you find are the biggest misconceptions?
To be frank, Peter, there are misconceptions aplenty. I mean, if you're, I'm not going to shy away from that. I think it is very hard to read the proverbial label from inside the bottle. We underestimate how seldom people have considered this or how low the awareness is. But once you sort of overcome that hurdle, when people get it, uniformly, categorically, like your reaction, excited, future of agriculture, solving so many problems, how wonderful is this? But there is a reasonable amount of education to be done. Common feedback around the perceived artificiality of this, which is fair, right? People, the shortcut they typically make might be, is this analogous to a synthetic meat, right? Is this beyond or impossible? And it feels a bit artificial. Right. And so that's when you take them on the journey to let them know, well, no. I mean, we use real seeds, right? We're not growing seeds in a lab. We're not manufacturing seeds from scratch. Yeah. We use real seeds with many partners, seed genomics businesses out of the Netherlands, actually, which is they're the sort of the trailblazers or the preeminent country for seed genomics and seed development. So it's a real seed that, would grow outdoors to some extent, and we just give it these perfect conditions and refine it for what we need to do. That's the first thing. The other thing is this idea of, okay, but is it genetically modified? The answer is absolutely no. Something else that comes up is I think people have this inherent understanding or preconceived notion that there is something better about the sun in and of itself and the soil. Nothing can be better than Mother Nature, right? This is the refrain. Nothing, surely Mother Nature will figure this out. Right. And the reality of that is educating people on this idea that's not true. There's nothing inherently superior about the sun or the soil. In fact, as we've seen, the soil quality across the world with industrial farming over the last 100 years has degraded significantly. The micronutrients being stripped out of the soil, less arable land, that soil being just used and abused. And so the soil is essentially inert. There is nothing fundamental in the soil that is going to improve or degrade your crop. And so that's what we do. We just have whatever your growing medium is or your substrate, that is where the plants will grow. The primary job is to essentially give the plant enough integrity or fortified enough over the first 10 days of its life cycle such that it germinates and gets enough height to basically stand on its own two roots, as it were. And then the sun, same thing, right? There is nothing inherently superior about the sun. It is just strains of light. And you could argue, of course, that we're just taking the best strains of light, putting them indoors, giving them to the plant at much more regular intervals as well. And so those are sort of the main questions that you get. And then the other one will be, okay, but what about the actual nutritional profile of this, right? Again, is there something different in the way this plant might interact with my body? Is it more or less bioavailable or digestible? Are you able to match the nutrients that are perceived to be high in, say, something like spinach or kale, high vitamin K, high magnesium, high iron, high folate? I mean, the reality of that's one of the greatest stories that we are still really yet to tell in Stacked Farm is this idea that we have significantly higher nutrient value. So it's actually a huge positive because we're not washing the produce, we're not chlorinating it. We can control all of the nutrients that we add and actually add as many nutrients as possible up to a point where you get diminishing returns on flavor or yield. And it's actually a better product to digest, more bioavailable and more nutrients. So yeah, those are the key kind of questions, and that's okay. And it's exciting to be able to take people on that journey and talk about how this is actually a wonderful feature of the business versus a bug. But yeah, I won't shy away from the fact that it is an arcane, mysterious, interesting, slightly odd concept. And it's our job to educate people that this is a huge net positive.
Sam, tell me about your personal motivation. You seem very passionate about this. What do you love about the work that you're doing with Stacked Farm?
I could tell you that I am the greeniest greenie to ever live, and I live in the inner west of Sydney, and I have Al Gore posters on my walls. But that's not strictly true. That's a part of this, okay? I mean, the fact that we're at the vanguard of innovation and sustainability is a part of that is so incredibly exciting. The fact that, I have a young son as well, and I find myself, it's no coincidence actually that I joined Stacked Farm just as my son was being born. Wanting to, have this reevaluation moment of, could I be doing something where I can straddle the excitement and the innovation and the speed of movement of that right stage of business with doing something wonderful for the world? Maybe that to me is so motivating. Like, could we be the business that transforms the way the world thinks about agriculture? And that is a lofty goal, right? Is there a world in years to come where this is a generational business that figures out wheat or rice, right? Figures out how to feed the third world through this, figures out how to do this in food deserts where people, either literal or metaphorical food deserts, where the notion of fresh produce is just completely foreign to people, right? And that's a real shame. So that, for me, that piece is incredibly exciting. And then broadly, I think for me, it's kind of almost the 5 prongs, some self-determinism theory, right? This idea that there's agency, there's mastery, feeling good about your role, there's purpose as well, definitely, that I have at Stacked Farm. And then I think the other big 2 pieces are the people we surround ourselves with, that common mission, that common goal, that common North Star that we've all got. And then underrated and underappreciated, I think, in sort of motivation and inspiration at our business is progress, because as much as you can be running towards something, it can be a bit demoralizing if you're not seeing the fruits of your labor or the proof in the pudding. And the fact that it feels like at our business, every single day we are refining something, improving something, moving towards a goal, that is extremely exciting and motivating. And I think our retention of especially the engineering function, which is about 60 to 70% of the business, I have never seen anything like this, Peter. We have not had a single engineer leave across mechanical, electrical, automation engineers for more than 4 years. I mean, I don't even know if it's happened really ever, to be frank, in the business. And a big part of their motivation is just the sheer scale of the challenges they get to solve every day. And that is something that's wonderful. Can I solve a new problem? Can the problems be interesting to me? Can the problems change regularly when new information comes to light? And all of those boxes are ticked.
Fantastic. Sam, thank you so much for joining me and telling us about Stacked Farm, and all the best for the future.
No worries. Great to chat. Thanks, Peter.
Thanks for listening. You can find more conversations like this wherever you listen to podcasts, and follow me and Planet Shapers on our social channels.